All right. Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today evening. I am glad that you're at a Tuesday Talkies, and if we failed at an attempt to create a Talkies-like experience, I'm sorry, that is not my fault. You're just not feeling the TOC vibe. For I can see Ankur first on my screen, and he says no vibe like the TOC vibe. So thank you again for joining us today evening. I am really glad that we are hosting as many of you who've already voluntarily joined. If anybody's reached out to you, hammered you to sign up, log into this call, please do not acknowledge that. Please do not acknowledge that for their sanity and for their reputation. My name is Manas. I'm going to be moderating this wonderful panel today. And trust me when I say this, it's going to be wonderful because it's been a journey in making for the last 2 to 3 weeks. We've had way too many conversations around it. And last week, when we connected about something, I swear onto this, I didn't even get a minute to speak. Those who know me, if I don't speak in a room, you can imagine what the energy that the four speakers are going to be coming out today are going to be doing. So I won't really take a lot of time. What I really want to do over here is just tell all of you one thing and one thing. No question is a bad question, and no question is a question if not asked. However, our honest request is all questions that you have while the panelists and speakers are sharing their thoughts, just make sure you use the chat box. Chat is literally your space. If we get the screen and the audio, trust me, chat can help you on the screen time and the audio time. This is my promise to you. If you've got a question, the silliest question that you can ask, go for it. It might just be the most relevant question that we need at that moment. Trust me, there are no wrong answers as well. So that is an advice that I have for my panelists. If you think you've got an answer, if you don't have an answer, just pass. I'm sure one of those who are there in the audience are going to take an attempt to, just probably fill into our shoes. Before we get started, I just want one activity, and I know I'm taking up time. That's what I always do. But there's about 26 of us in this room. If I don't get at least 13, that is half of it. I need, if you're feeling the TOC vibe, you need to go into chat box and write boom. If you don't write boom, I don't know that you're awake. Everybody, those who've got their cameras off, those who've got their cameras on, those who are switching on and switching off between their cameras, please, I can see three people. I can see Puneet was first, Shweta second, Neeraj is third. Where is everybody else? I see Nilima's put in over there. I see Neetu's done it, Raksha's done it. Ashima's gone for an extra long boom with 3 extra M's. I know, Ashima, you love me a lot. Thank you for that. Himanshu's put in his boom. Shivani, I can see you on camera, but I still can't see a boom, yeah. What is this? I still see there's not enough. There's Shanmukha who's done this. I see Vasanta's gone ahead and unmuted himself or herself and gone out and said a boom. Fantastic. I'm loving this. Show me some more love. Show me some more love. Great. Nisha's there as well. Now we know everybody is active. And this evening, I promise you, is going to be a very exciting discussion. Very, very exciting discussion. Right. So without further ado, let me just quickly introduce, people around the room. Someone's got their microphone on. If you can just mute yourself, just let the panelists have it on for a while. But whoever's got their microphone on, I've got Aparna Chandrasekharan, who at my screen right now is at the top right, who's a school counselor. We've got Charushila Narula, who's going to be donning her hat, or you know what? We also call her as Edushila. Yeah. So she's going to be donning her hat as a university guidance counselor and someone who's helped a lot of students get abroad. We've got Nirbhay, who's representing Lumiere, who's a project manager. Nirbhay, I hope I've got the designation right. But we heard a little
Partner
from him.
success manager.
Partner success manager, but we heard a little from him at Jindal. I hope we get a chance to get to know him even more today. He speaks very well, trust me. I would want to speak English like that someday, in that very calm tone, in that very soft voice, but I fail every time. And then we've got my dear friend who's been my roommate for one time and the next door room guy for the other time, who's hosted us, Priyank, who actually went ahead out of his way and said that we should do this session. So I would like to say, can we get a big round of applause for our speakers or panelists? But you've got an emoji on your screen. Can you all go and send an emoji? Can you tell all your panelists that you really love them, you're really looking forward to hear from them? I want all of you to really go in and send in a reaction. Maybe send in a heart emoji, send in a clap emoji, however you want to. And I know for a fact that Charushila's had a big smile. Priyank's been cool. Mera time aayega. Nirbhay is there and Aparna's there. So how about this, Nirbhay? We start with you. I know you've got some thoughts to share, but no, no, no. Let me do this. Let me do this. I see Aparna suddenly nodded the moment I said we start. Aparna, why don't you go ahead? I know you've got some starting thoughts to share with us. Floor is all yours, even if you have a presentation to show. All for you, Aparna.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Manas. I'll just go to my, yeah. So, sorry. So we'll start with some of the basics, the introduction, the sort of definitions. We'll start off from there. And of course, I'm honored to be on this panel with some very august speakers here today and a very vibrant, vivacious moderator that we have as well today. So thank you for that. Yeah, so research, if you were to, in the classic way, define it, is basically just a systematic investigation and study of materials. It's essentially about using established methods to investigate a problem or a question and go into it in detail with the aim of generating some new knowledge. That's essentially what research is all about. There are various types of research that are practiced by, scientists or social scientists, or if, people in the field of pure science or elsewhere. It depends on the purpose for which the research is being practiced or carried out, the scope for which it is being carried out, as well as the kind of data that you're trying to collect, the variables, the inference you're trying to draw from that kind of research, all of that. So there are various ways in which. It is important, of course, here to remember that when we are talking about the high school perspective, that students are not going to be perhaps using all of these different types of research. They might probably be working on several of these ways of doing research for their particular project or for their particular paper. And so might not be limited to one way of doing research, or it might be just limited to one way. That depends on the kind of project the student chooses. But more important than even talking about the type of research, I think what is important is to understand why pursue research in high school. I think that's the key. First thing is, of course, it offers students an opportunity to gain knowledge about information and ideas which are beyond their curriculum or syllabus. So that's one reason. So it gives them intellectual and personal growth opportunities. Two is it provides evidence of the ability of the student's domain knowledge, so evidence of scholarship in that particular field. Now, it can be possible that a student pursues research in a particular field which is aligned to the subject major the student might choose to pursue later in college as well. Now, it also provides students with valuable transferable skills which will be used lifelong, not just in high school and college, but also when they get to the work environment or wherever they're going to be pursuing their careers. Whether it is academic or scientific writing skills, whether it is organizing, time management, and planning skills, whether it is critical thinking or problem solving skills, whether it is just information literacy, all of these are skills that students will learn when they're pursuing a research project. And of course, it helps them to, sort of understand a little bit more about potential career paths, um, and gain more knowledge about that particular field of study that they wish to pursue in the future. Quickly, just talking briefly about applications. For example, if you're doing experimental research, it has applications in the fields like biology, chemistry, physics, social sciences. If you're doing theoretical research, there is cosmology, philosophy, economics. These are, subject areas in which there are applications for this kind of research. The ones that I've outlined over here. These are just some examples to sort of give you an understanding. Quickly coming to a point of research and school projects. Now, any review of additional material in my mind beyond the textbooks to gain knowledge is research. That research can be for an essay the student is writing, it can be for a school assignment, it can be for a project, it can be for something they're doing in their lab, whether it's a science lab or a STEAM lab or a maker lab, maker studio. Any information they're learning additionally is a kind of research. The thing to remember is that research of this kind, which they do at the high school level, can be the stepping stone to writing a research paper. That research paper could be written even in high school, or it can be even written much later in life. But it can start off the skill sets that they learn, as well as the process of how to do research, can be started off right at the high school level itself. I'll just go with one more slide and then hand over to my other panelists. I talk about a little bit about the sort of what are the building blocks or the foundations that you can create for students before they can embark on research. What is most important in high school is to create this foundation for problem solving and critical thinking. That comes from giving them tasks rather than just exams and tests at the end of the day. So the more you ask them to explore and be inquisitive and curious and learn more, that's when they're going to learn that this is actually research that I'm actually doing in my learning. Encourage an ecosystem where they are not afraid to ask why, what, how every time you teach a concept. So whether you're a teacher or a counselor, they should have the confidence to ask you that question, and it's these questions which will get them thinking basically as to why does this happen the way it does, and is there an explanation for this? And in that pursuit of finding or searching information for this is when they're starting to do their research. I also ask students to try something that is non-routine, that is not something that they do in their day-to-day classroom work. I think that is where when they put their thinking caps on, that's when critical thinking and problem solving becomes a way of life for them in their day-to-day learning space as well. So I think these are just with some opening remarks. I'll stop sharing my screen, and then I'll request Manas to move it off to the next panelist.
Thank you, Aparna. I quite honestly have to say that there's a lot for me as well to learn over there, and I hope all the people who are viewing have learned. I really specifically liked how you talked about research as a skill. And we know for a fact that, over the last 1 week or so, we've been dwelling. I think Priyanka and I have had a lot of these conversations about research as a skill, research as a transferable skill. And more importantly, what does it really take to build? If there are certain key points that he'd like to share as a PhD scholar for young counselors who are out there and are viewing this, just add on to what you've already done. So Priyank, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Manas. I wish I could give such introductions. Maybe someday I'll have special training regime with you. I have a PPT, but I'll just start from, by discussing where I come from. So, so to say, I've gone to some of, let's say in double quotes, good institutes of the country. I did my undergraduation from NIT and then from post graduation from TES. And why I mention why I'm doing my marketing is because even though I had some of the best institute experience, it was not until my PhD that I really understood research. So, this question really was bothering me always, that how could you have an impactful research in our country from young generation when they have no idea about how to conduct research. And the idea where we say that we have so much of misinformation, there is certain what you call your WhatsApp university, or where do students or younger generation find authentic information. I think we'll have to identify that research is everywhere, and it's not like we don't do it, it's just that we don't know what is the best places to do that. So from that experience, when I was working with, so I worked with students who go abroad for their higher education, and I realized that research is something which really helps them prepare for higher education. So not just abroad, in India also, when you go for a higher education in after your 12th grade, we have to identify research as a skill, because it becomes, so to say, a responsibility of the counselor as such, or rather some anybody who is guiding the child, that they help them develop a research skill. So I used to nudge counselors that they should help students figure out what is core to them, and do some research in that area, because something as simple as academic writing, forget about any fancy research as such, but can students in their 12th grade, when they're moving on to their higher education, can they do authentic academic writing? I think that was something which was, I was always asking this question, as I always asking with counselors. So I'll just also share my quickly run through my PPT. I think just covering all the points that I want to cover. All right. So beginning with why research, I think, see, we have to understand this as counselors, teachers, parents, whatever your role you are in, doesn't matter. I think we have to understand that our students, or for a nation like India, which who wants to probably reach those miles where we are the most developed country in the world, or have uh, most sound economy as such. I think research is the backbone for everything. So this is, we have to lay this foundation of research for our students, and we have to start early. And it is a skill which doesn't necessarily have to come in a particular field. So this idea where it is only STEM or students, but it is skill agnostic of the field as such, and it is a skill which can be developed in any field, and it adds on, contributes to any other skill as such, which is critical thinking, creative thinking. I think Aparna has already touched on that. Now the next big question for counselors is mostly, where I've seen these discussions where counselors feel that you know in high school you don't need it, and it is too early for research and everything. I would say that the truth is, students already do research. The argument is, how do they do it? I think that is the difference we have to create. If you give them any assignment, they will quickly go to Google, search, find out the points, bring it all together, and give you an essay. Is that really research? So this is also a kind of research, but is that the research you want your students to do? So we'll have to channelize their energy in doing authentic research. So now, so how should research look like in high school? So I work with a lot of students who come from, of course, when students come from international boards, they already have some background in research, but I have worked with students mostly with who come from CBSE background, who don't even know how to do proper academic writing. And for them, my aspirations are never like some high end quality paper published in, I don't know, XYZ journal. It is always, can they change the way they write, and can they change the way they have been doing research till now? Just that. So I think instead of counselors thinking of research or research paper as such, where there is some high quality thing output, I think we have to break away from that notion and start thinking what is authentic to our children, to your student, that we need to figure out. And every child research, as I already said, that every child does research anyway. Now when it comes to research question, I think whatever questions you ask in the classroom, that itself can be turned into a research question. So instead of telling the child, asking a child that what does, probably when you're talking about geography as such, instead of telling them what is the significance of particular this thing, can you turn into a research question where they go find out the right places where they can search about it, research about it, read about it, and come back to you? I think that's a process which even teachers can take up. So it's, the idea is to incorporate research in what we do with our students, and think of it as a journey for the child to understand what good writing and what looking for right places to gather data looks like. And I think I've already mentioned that it is, It really takes you away from this whole idea where right now we are victims to misinformation from different sources like social media. Of course, when it comes to research for higher education, it is a differentiator for great schools. So if you're applying abroad for great universities, if you look at, you know, Ivy Leagues or any other university as such, if you have a research paper which you have done well and which helped the admissions committee know that you understand research, I think that is enough. Not to really say that when I say well, I'm not trying to term it as a 20-page draft of some extraordinary endeavor. So, when I speak to my students, I see where they are, and they really change the way they are doing writing, change the way they are looking at databases, doing research, and change the way they come up with any paper as such. That is it. So it prepares them, and then when they go for their higher, if this is done by the teachers, by the counselors, and it really helps students to gain that skill. And when you go for a higher education, you need that. You take up any university in higher education right now, research forms the foundation, and if you already have that skill, you really stand out when you go there. And further adding to this, I think it really helps you make those informed career choices. So for you also to understand, to research about any entity as such, whether it is career choices or other aspects, I think research, knowing how to do right research really helps. So as I say in my last point, yes, it helps in abroad application, it helps you get you your dream colleges, but I think we should do it irrespective. So the next question which counselors usually have is, where to start. Do we need to have a fancy idea? So I always say that start from where the child is. So you will always see that children have already done something. So with my first call with my students is about what they have done. What do they usually, what are their passions, what are their interests, and whatever project they've already done in their schools, in their classrooms, with their teachers, in their subjects, I take leaves out of them and then help them form a research question out of it. So the how to part is when you identify the research question, you go help them understand how to do a good literature review, what has been already done in this area, then form research methodology of you could do a primary, secondaries. These are, I think, simple terms which you can help the children understand, students understand that how to do it, and finding out the right ways, the right tools to do your data collection and analysis. I think something as simple as that is enough for us to help children build that paper. So it doesn't matter. Many times we think that children has built something, they have created something. I would always say that whatever they have done, that can be put into a paper. So when I say research paper, when I say papers, it could be a process also, it could be a framework also, it could be whatever they have done in their projects. All that can be turned into papers. It is about authentic way of looking at the whole process. Now, I've just put in an activity. Maybe we would have done it if we had more time. But the idea is, how do you do this? So you can, as a counselor, if most of us are counselors here, pick up any of your learners' project which you have guided them on. Think of what is the central theme of the project and think how you can turn that into a research question. Make a flow diagram of the whole project. Now look at, if this is my research question, this is the project looking like, what has been already done in this area. Go back to literature, let the student do the literature review, read it, and come back to you that there are similar projects or similar ideas floating in literature. That review that student does, I think that's the, so to say, for students who have never done research, CBSE kids whom I work with, they find it hard to do literature review. That's a very important skill that they develop. Now after they have done that, we help them identify the right tools. You sit with them, find out what tools they can take up so that they can do some research in the area, put those. So it could also happen that their whole process of the project would have a certain tools that they are taken up, but they don't know the names to it. So one of my students, for example, was working on shoes. So he was really interested in shoes, and he had a passion for shoes. How does the market of shoes work? So he used to go talk to the people who wholesale people, retail people. So the new brands which come in, they are really sold at as high as 5 lakhs, 6 lakhs for a pair of shoes. And he was really interested in why is it happening. So you should go and talk to these people. So I asked them, what did you ask him or her? So he told that I used to ask these questions. So he's basically using the tool of interview. I helped him churn the whole thing into a structured interview that he can do to ask the kind of questions he needs. So he's not doing anything extraordinary. He's already interested in the field, has already gone and spoken to these people. I am just helping him turn that into a research endeavor. I'm just telling him that this is called interview. This is a tool that you are using. Can you also do FTD if possible? And what are the questions? Put down the questions that you answer. So earlier he was going and randomly asking these people whatever came to his mind. Now I was asking him to put down the question in a structured or a semi-structured format and then go and do those interviews, and then put everything in paper, how he would write a paper. So I think that really helped him build a paper out of what he was already doing. Outcomes, so in terms of outcomes, again, not necessarily high end, but I think the key outcomes here is they should be able to do academic writing, know what are the right sources and do review of literature, evaluate what are the databases they need to look at if they feel that. So simply googling and finding out what is the size like, and now, I think that is not the best way to go about what database is really important database, how to do secondary research when you are thinking of any research project, finding out the ways to create tools and doing that primary research, and of course, if possible, having a more nuanced understanding of the whole research endeavor as such. So these are some simple important learning points I have put here. If you are able to achieve even few of them, I think it really serves the purpose. But as simple as that, not necessarily anything extraordinary or rather extravagant. This is my last slide. I just put few tools or websites that you can look at. One, though most of this you may be knowing, but I'm just telling that typeset.io is a search engine dedicated to research papers. I think you can always take this up with your students. Gives great results and sometimes not, but I think it's a very important website to look at if you are searching for research papers. I will close here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Priyank, for your thoughts. And I like the fact that our audience has already grown from 26 to 41 in this brief interval. And the fun fact is, we've already had I'm writing this down, we've got about 7 questions and 2 observations. The good thing out there is, I think Aparna and Priyank have already taken up a couple of questions and answered a couple of those things. Priyank, I think your screen is still sharing. If you just mind, stop sharing. Yeah. So let me just switch my focus also. I think this has just become a subconscious. A female starts and then a male goes and then a female goes for that and then nearby goes. So but I still go with convention for a while. So just going with Charushila, I know for a fact that you've actually helped a whole lot of students you know build personal projects or research projects, and you've been in that space that has been specifically working on the college application matrix. So I know for a fact that it can do no justice for the little amount of time we can give to each of you speakers. But if you'd like to share a little about how you've seen research, how you've seen these challenges, how you've even seen this whole approach coming specifically from someone who's been guiding students while applying abroad, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Manas. Well, I want to start with a submission. So, my name is Shahrukh Shila. I'm the founder director, Key Mentor, University Connection, and I am responsible. Yes, I'm a counselor and I'm also a parent, and I, along with so many adults, we are responsible for making you believe that if you add a research document to pad your profile, you will increase your chances of getting into a competitive, or let me put it, super competitive universities across the world. Okay, so if I'm speaking to the student in the room, and if someone listens to this as a video, I know, dear student, that you're tired. You're tired of studying. You're tired of giving multiple exams, doing all the adult work of maybe cleaning rivers or composting, building mental health apps, and starting businesses. And now we want you to research. We want you to publish. We want you to boast of scholarship even before you turn 80. So, I mean, are we really serious here? The whole point is that at high school, instead of building broader interests and developing meta skills of reading, time management, or just general hard work and engaging in activities that demonstrate curiosity, we are spending time on the idea of formal research or publishing. And is it really so necessary, or is it absolutely unnecessary? And I don't want to get into an absolute spiel on this, but maybe I'm sounding a bit of the devil's advocate here. So let's just look at what this application, college application matrix, what it really looks like. And when Manas threw this term at me, college application matrix, I mean, it got me thinking about what is the real matrix out there. So pardon my understanding, but really speaking, we are sitting in that matrix of sorts. But coming to serious stuff, your college application matrix might actually, of course, include your academic scores. It will include some test scores. You may be giving your SATs or TSA or TOEFL, IELTS, and various other exams. Of course, recommendation letters are important in the college application matrix. The activity profile, the elusive activity profile that we keep talking about, we'll discuss a little more on that. And then, of course, your college essays. All of this coming together, it seems to me that becomes like that strong pitch that you're trying to make to universities, right? And the big question that we get asked as counselors, whether school counselors, IECs, mentors, or teachers, and otherwise also, we get asked, is there really a rule to actually arrive at the best activity profile? Is there something that I can do to just, upgrade everything? So the idea is that, I'm sorry, there are no rules as such when it comes to this. Yes, I went a little overboard with this matrix idea, as you can see. But nevertheless, just to add to the energy that Manas has, shared with all of us, there is a glitch in the matrix. Okay, and because of that glitch in the matrix, we need to understand that building unique activity profiles at the end of the day involves multiple things. So to give you an example, I've had multiple students now, and it's been a pleasure working with so many different types of students. But this one student, for example, recently she comes from a small town in Vadodara, and she started this research project on understanding the effects of certain foods on negative emotions. So the idea was to create a combination of food items that would reduce the extent to which that emotion is generally experienced by a sufferer. Now she's a biology aspirant of sorts, and so the learning goal in her case was to understand how the brain and hormones and emotions and their connection with food and how that really happens. Of course, it's at the intersection of neuroscience and psychology. At the same time, here is another, and again, this was born out of the fact that her mother, who recently had a baby, was going through these postpartum issues, and it was perhaps born out of that, and the doctor suggesting her certain kinds of food. Here comes another student who, during the pandemic and during this whole upsurge of, computer science, AI, and everybody talking about chat GPT and everything else, she saw that one of her parents lost her job. And she decided to research on how has the implementation of artificial intelligence affected job displacement and entrepreneurship as such. Another student who is a boarding school student comes from a town in Manali where, she we were struggling a lot with trying to figure out, what are the gaps in her profile and how could she really build on things. Until one day she shared with me how every time she goes back home, her parents are always complaining about the harvest going waste. And her parents owned these apple and orange orchards. And that's when we decided that maybe that would be a meaningful project to actually work on. She not only developed a training program to train the farmers or local farmers in that area, but also ended up reducing the waste being produced by I think segregating the entire fruit harvest into let's say partially rotten or completely rotten fruit. And so partially rotten could easily be converted into ciders and jams and everything else, while the other could be used uh, in the local market. The idea being that this child was, again, not she was a business aspirant, but at the same time she ended up learning a little bit about agriculture. She learned about psychology. She learned about talking to a different level of people, and of course doing all of this together at the end of the day. So what are we trying to get at here? At the end of the day, when you look at a profile, it's not, now frankly I've given equal points to everything that you see on the screen right now. It is more about understanding that there is a certain uniqueness that already exists within your own narrative, within your own story. It's about allowing that story to really emerge. Because, and I 100% echo with my fellow speakers here, where they say that research is a skill, It's the single most important skill, by the way, alongside leadership, that can help you not only get into the college of your dreams, but also help you um, lead a great life, frankly, because you suddenly become more observant. You suddenly start looking at these issues and you start figuring out solutions to these. But it also it does not need to always translate into a paper or something that you publish. The best way to sometimes showcase this abilities of research is to create and work on live and impactful projects. And this is just me talking, and in some ways connected to your story, connected to your narrative, right? Because at the end of the day, when this whole family approaches you with, we want to do a research project is what will add value to the whole application matrix. The idea has to be to, instead of research, start searching, and start searching for those things that are lifelong. What is lifelong? Honesty is lifelong, justice is lifelong, working on the basics of truth and empathy is lifelong.
Equity.
Equity is lifelong, exactly. And the moment you start associating, the role we as educators have is to help students look at these deeper realms that bring meaning to their projects. And that's when you'll know that you always have a project up your sleeve. You'll never be struggling to figure out what to do. So for me, research is search. Thank you. Over to you, Manas.
Thank you, Charushila. I feel left out. So while you were talking and showing us matrix memes, I made my own meme, but I'll show that later on to everybody. Uh, Before I get to my meme and I change the mood again. So Nirbhay, I've when we spoke last time around, you were sharing specifically on how you worked on a lot of profile building uh, projects and how you really helped research become one of those key activities that a young learner, let's say specifically a teenager who's in a school, has used towards profile building. Before we really get into, let's say, a push and a pull in terms of questions and more like a heated environment of discussions, I just wanted to give us some examples on how you believe specifically in your journey of helping young teenagers, profile building or specifically research has been used as a tool.
Well, yeah, of course, Manas. Thanks so much for that second introduction, as amazing as the first. And I just have to say that, I'm really glad that Aparna and Priyanka have laid so much of the foundation for what research is, and for Charshula to have played the devil's advocate, because I get to really be the angel this time. This is going to be a weird coincidence, but I'll just share my screen. I'm also starting by talking about exactly what Charshula was discussing, which is this idea of research does not have to be the be all end all. The student at the end of the day is going to be doing so many different things during high school. They're going to be exploring volunteering, they're going to be learning about subjects, they're going to be exploring the world around them, ideally engaging with it in a certain way. And in my experience, what I've found is that research, when it's just one part of all of these different activities and is not really connected to any of them, is not really effective. It might as well be a school paper that a student has done in grade 8 or grade 9 that they've not really taken forward. But what we found in a lot of the students that come to us and the students who have made something effective out of their research project is that they've taken the projects or the interests or the passions that they already had and used research as a way to make that cohesive, not only as a, for their college applications or for their profile, but as a student, something that they were able to take forward into college, beyond that into their professional life. And when I say that it brings a level of cohesiveness, I mainly in these slides am going to be taking you through some case studies or these examples of students who worked with us and how research ended up playing a role where it wasn't just a case of building those research and writing skills, which are obviously one of the most integral things that they do, but using parts of their own profile to discover a uniqueness that otherwise would have come across as more disparate parts of a whole. So I'll take you through a couple of case studies. You don't have to read that text. I'm happy to share this later as well, but I'll just quickly summarize this where you'll see a couple of students who worked with us in the way that for them, research became a path where they could explore a pre-existing interest. For Andre here, he was already interested in volunteering with people who had ADHD and autism, and he was really interested in understanding neurodivergence and the linkages between ADHD and autism. For him, when he came to us to talk about research, it wasn't just an idea of, well, I want to do this in the future and I want to understand it and research will help me get there. It came from the perspective of something that he deeply cared about. He had so much interest and so much experience working with people who were going through these cases of neurodivergence, and wanted to understand it from a more scientific perspective. I think Aparna put it best when she said, research is systematic investigation, because it is a skill we use every day. It's not something that, we often think of it as lab coats and beakers and all those things. But at the end of the day, it is just that you want to understand something better. Ideally, you have a method that you use to be able to do that. And that method is what, you can call the scientific method, you can call it research methodologies, you can call it systematic investigations. But the idea is you want to engage with the world around you and understand something better. Vinayak, on the other hand, towards your right, he was someone who, again, was really, really interested in STEM. He had been part of the competitions at school. He had a club at school that he was working in. And again, he could have done research in something that was unrelated to that, right? He could have done research that was going to be more in line with something he wanted to do in his undergrad program. And his high school journey could have been a way for him to sort of flourish all these different activities that he was a part of, whether it was in the way that he showed initiative or in the way that he was part of this larger group. But what Vinayak did is, through his research paper overlapping with a lot of the things that he was already working on, it allowed him to enhance the quality of that research paper and bring out something in his application to these university that was essentially able to show not just a demonstrated interest in that subject, but a willingness to go the extra step. A lot of those values that Charles was talking about, right? The idea of truth and honor and honesty. These values are, at least in a very holistic application, what a lot of admission officers are looking for. That's what, as counselors, as educators, we're also looking for in our students. And research is not the one that's going to bring it all together for everyone. It has to come from the student. It has to come from dedicated effort put into realizing this vision. And often the students don't know this vision when they start. I'll give you a quick example. We had a student last year who had been working, in their volunteering efforts, working with a river cleanup close to their school, and they're really passionate about this. And when they started to do research, they realized that, if they just did that again, it would be redundant. They wanted to explore it further. So what they ended up doing was they had been in conversation with one of their friends about something they'd been talking about in biology, which was this type of plant that could be a viable replacement for leather, but nobody had really tested it that much, and the students were not sure how to go forward with it. So this student of ours decided that, okay, why don't I do this for myself? Let me plant small batches of this plant in my garden. Let me try and harvest those, and let me speak to a mentor who can help me run that experiment and understand whether, mass production of this kind of a plant is possible. So the idea itself is not coming from the mentor or the counselor or the educator. This is something the student and their friends were discussing when they were out there, cleaning up rivers and really passionately working on something that they cared about. But the idea for the research coming from that meant that it was such a unique way for it to be a part of these students' overall high school journey that it became an effective way to show a lot of the academic rigor and values that otherwise students struggle to even bring out in essays. So research, I would say, is not just a way to, it's not just a skill. It's not just a way for you to, show that you have certain academic rigor. It is at its core, because it's so applicable to almost every way that you engage with the world, a way for you to really bring together who you are and try to not learn it instead of different skills that you could be learning, but use those skills and transfer it into research in a way that is effective for who you are as a student. And as a counselor and teacher, for us to be able to recognize that in all of our students. So I'll stop right now. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about in terms of introductory statements. And I think from here, Manas, we can move on to a more, conversational aspect of this panel.
Definitely. Thank you, Nirbhay, for that. And thank you, Priyank, Aparna, Charushila, and Nirbhay, all of you, for I think what's happened is more than opening remarks, these just became observatory remarks. And what you've done is you've reduced my workload in terms of being a moderator, but increased my workload in terms of being a presenter. Because now I have to think of more. You've already started answering what I had in line for you. But what I want to do is, before we get into the next segment,
Manas,
where you, yes,
I'm
please.
sorry to interrupt your flow of thought, but I do believe there is a need for also sharing a word of caution here about research papers. Children have gone on to believe that it's something they can add to their bandwagon of activities, that are going to impress the universities, whether they be Indian universities or university representatives abroad who are reviewing their applications. Children have gotten to this thing that a research paper is a must. I must do it. It's going to make a huge difference to my getting admitted to a particular university. But what they must remember is the first reading of that application, perhaps only 8 minutes is spent on that, barely maybe 7 or 8 minutes is spent on that. The person reading the application may not have expert knowledge in the research topic that the student has done the research paper in. They mustn't forget that either. Third is, the research paper is just, remember, one element of your entire application package. It's not going to completely change the destiny of your of the admissions committee's decision as to whether you get into that university because of your research paper. It can happen, and it's happened to a former advisee of mine, for an example that I can share later if we have time, because that student, based on that research paper, got into the best universities. Every university was vying to get him and give him funding. It was that kind of a research paper. So that also, maybe I'll share the example here. So the student was working on an area of physics, in the area of space debris, and how, we need to control it and what can be done to control it. Now, the research paper was of, and this was done all by himself, no mentorship except the school physics teacher. There was nobody else, no mentor beyond. And the quality of the paper was so good, it was accepted for publication by Acta Astronautica, which is a journal in which astronomers and astrophysicists publish their papers. It was invited for presentation at the European Space Congress, and the government of India recognized the child for the Bal Puraskar as well. No wonder every university was beating his doorstep for giving him admission and funding. And he was able to appeal for 100% funding, and pretty much everybody again said, yes, we'll give it to you. That was the quality of the paper, but that's not always going to be the case. So I think we do need to also sound a word of caution about research papers. Genuine students who are interested will come up, will work hard, will definitely pour their heart into doing the research because they are interested in that subject. But others mustn't use this as a crutch to overcoming poor grades or overcoming lack of other activities that they may have on their profile. I think I do wish to sound this word of caution here.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because actually the next question that I was going to ask, and I was going to ask to all four of you, was a little related. If I won't say specifically around what you said, but again, before I come to that question, I find it, and I want the four of you tell me if you also find it. I find it deeply offending. There's 42 people in the room, and only five of us are showing these pretty faces on a Tuesday evening, really tired, coming out of a weekend which was either fun or too lazy for us. I want to see some smiles in the room. Can we please switch on our cameras? It just gives us some more energy. We can only give you back what you give us. Please, can we have some cameras? I see four are on, five, and after five it stopped. Come on, please. Six, seven, eight. Great. This is building up. I like this. Great. I see everybody is now switching on the cameras. And if you've not seen this already, please head to the chat section. I think there are two parallel panel discussions that are happening. Chat section has a different panel discussion that is happening. It has 6 questions which have got 6 answers each. So there's a whole trail of knowledge that is out there. And I love the fact that this panel has actually forced you to get out of your comfort zone of not only just absorbing what may have been talked about 4 or 5 people, but even to put out what's the question in your mind. If you've got an answer to a question that's already there, it makes my job easy, and I'm very, very happy that all of you are doing this. So before I go ahead and ask that question, I did tell you that I had a little bit of FOMO, and I want to make sure that I make up for it. Can you all see my screen? See, this is what happens when you attend Tuesday Talkies. You start as one version of Ishan Avasthi and you end as the other, right? If you agree with me, please, those who joined the session late, we started with this. You need to put a boom in the chat box. Please, if you agree that the last 30 minutes, 40 minutes have given you some one thing to learn, and if not one thing to learn, if you just found me very nice and adorable, please put a boom in that chat. I want you to put a boom. Look at this. The moment I said nice and adorable, there are so many booms. I know for a fact all of you love me a lot. Oh my God, Neeraj has gone out and said boom bastic. I love you, Neeraj. You're going to get one extra kulfi from my side for that. Great. So while everybody is now back energized again, I know for a fact that absorbing information is just as difficult for us, and it gets tougher with age. Please, this is not to all the people who've gotten older, but even for me, as young individuals, as teenagers, we absorb quite fastly. Now this takes a little bit of engagement, so I like to keep doing this. I have this question for my panel, and I really want them to take a minute each in any particular order, whichever they like. You know, you've spoken about research, whether now it's a skill or a college application tool, as a passion project, something that you do in school, something that could, just be done for the heck of it, for namesake of it. It might be accessible to someone, not accessible to someone. My question to you is, and the four of you were with me in the back room earlier, right? I shared an embarrassing story about myself in that very quick 30-second thing. What do you do to reinforce a positive attitude? Because the one thing that binds all of you, all four of you, you've been talking about that young teenage kid actually going ahead and doing research amongst the myriad of things that they're already doing. I remember being a teenager, my life was go to school, wake up late, it's okay, you can jump to bus stops, get another bus, come back home, sleep, have a banana shake, go to coaching, not go to coaching, play cricket. And most of us had a fairly simpler life. Yesterday we were there in Shady and a couple of my friends were discussing, looking at a young kid. Parents could be sitting in the lawn talking to their kids, didn't have their cell phones, and like, hey man, this used to be 90s. And suddenly we'll fast forward to 2020, most kids won't even live up without their cell phones. So where I really want to take this discussion is what so if each of you can again give some perspective coming from your own experience specifically, where one is a research guide, one is a research partner, one like a structured program, one of you has got university applications, one of you is at school. How do we really reinforce that positive attitude specifically to a student or a learner who really may want to do this, may or may not have the skill or the aptitude or the ability to converse as well in a language that may be desired by a university, and to make them walk away a little bit from the frustration or the discouragement that they hear from themselves. I'm not even talking about others. I think all 40, 50 people in this room will go out and encourage some new individual to go out and do research, but I'm talking about what they do to themselves. So anybody who wants to go first, if I don't know, if I had to make a pick, maybe why don't we start with Charushila, then go to Nirbhay, Priyank, and Aparna.
Okay. Manas, you know what the question that you've asked is at the very core of any kind of career guidance and mentoring. And I remember in 2018, I wrote this blog, which was about how despite all odds, I had actually climbed the highest monastery in the world, the Tiger's Nest in Bhutan. And I remember at that time I had written that there are journeys that make a vacation, a memory, or a Facebook post, and then there are journeys that make us who we are. I actually feel the same way about college planning journeys. Research or no research, it has to be centered around self discovery. The moment you speak to a student who's excited about cricket, let's say, or they're excited about gaming or art or animals or people, anything, they light up. The moment you have to be observing that moment of lighting up. The moment you find that within a student, that's the time you need to switch gears and you say, okay, let's see what subjects are you now interested in. And can you see how you can link sometimes that subject to that lighting up moment? For example, the economics of cricket, for example, or the psychology of gaming, or the intersection of machines and art, or let's say the chemical composition of animal shelters. Can you create these kind of inter disciplinary intersectional abilities for them and help them to think through those? At least that's one thing that's worked very well for me as a guide, as a mentor, as a counselor, and I learn from them all the time. And also being patient sometimes. But I'll just stop here. Maybe you can take some more bites.
Yeah, I think thank you so much, Ursula. Actually, I wanted to build on that because for me, when it comes to sort of trying to maintain that positive mindset in terms of research, I'll talk about, the student I'll talk about is myself. 10 years ago, I was doing my research for the first time as my extended essay in 11th grade. And that time I had just seen Iron Man, and I was like, I'm going to be a mechanical engineer. My paper is going to be on physics. It's going to be amazing. But the advice I would like to give is just you have to, there's no way to create that positive mindset. There's no way to have this journey be one about self-discovery if there's a pressure to succeed. You have to be okay with failure. My paper sucked. It sucked so bad. It actually made me realize that what I liked about Iron Man was not the physics, it was the storytelling of the movie and how it worked. And that's eventually what led me into English literature. But if I hadn't had that experience, it would have taken me much longer. I know so many of my friends who have done engineering and then realized they wanted to do something else. So I really credit that failed experiment of mine, that essay I wrote. I spent 3 months of my life on it, and I did the experiment to the very end, and then it didn't work, to no one's surprise except me. But when it didn't work, and a couple of months after that, I think that was what I was really able to take away from it. That I'm still glad I did this, because I know now not to look at this as a failure, but to look at it as a learning experience. And there is no way to do research if you look at it with the idea of, I need to get to a certain place. Half the time, your experiments aren't going to work. Your hypothesis will be a failure. Your attempts will not, connect. But if that is what you hold on to, it becomes very, very difficult to keep going and realize you'll have the next day. And without that, I don't think there is a positive mindset for any student to be able to preserve.
Okay, I'll jump in. See, I will tell you, I'll give a practical answer of what I do. So, usually, my students, like whoever I talk to, I kind of become a co learner with them. So, there are spaces, there are, so to say, things that they know that I have absolutely no idea about. I had no idea that there is a certain market for shoes, for example, and they are sold in a different way. And as soon as the new brand comes in, there's a whole lobby which is happening. So that students was actually teaching me that what is happening in that area and what happens. So the idea is for me to look at what is the student really interested in, and then ask them as many questions as possible, and then ask them to put, say, the difference comes that they have to put everything on paper. They might do good research, and there is a vast difference of doing it and then putting it on paper. But then I have to push them, and if I, practically speaking, we have to start early, because in 12th grade they don't have time to put things on paper. Very practical, that they have sat APs, everything on their head, and then they, or rather, even if they are looking at India, they have 12th boards and they are so worried and everything. I would say they have to start a little early in terms of putting it on paper, though they are already doing a lot of work. And then the counselor has to take a role of co-learner, where the students drive it, and they keep nudging and understanding the space more. Because one of my other student was looking at sentiment analysis of how he was interested in cryptocurrency. So he was looking at how the whole tweeting is, affecting the Bitcoin prices. And I had no idea what is sentiment analysis. I literally don't know what do you do with it. But then he taught me what happens in sentiment analysis, and he taught me that, if I want to do this to understand how Bitcoin pricing works and everything, and then I only guided him to put things on paper. And I think it was a fantastic paper. So when I'm saying that, uh, in my presentation I was trying to say that we have to bring down, not look at as a high end paper. I was saying that, not to say that you don't, let their imaginations fly high. Of course, if they can do a good work, let them create great papers. That is, of course, that's not the way saying that you bring it down, but let's just also understand where they come from and nudge them as much as possible. And if you start early, I think it really helps.
I think also taking on from what Priyank said is that not all of us are experts in every subject. So we may not be the right people to guide them when they come to us with a question or an idea, for example. But we may be the catalyst to finding those people for them, whether that is a mentor or even pointing them in the direction of the biology teacher or the humanities teacher or the social science teacher, because that's the best way to start, is to start with people at school. Or we might know, as a school counselor, for example, that there are parents in our school community who work in this particular field, or this is their area of interest, and we connect the student to those people. But I think, like what Charishila also mentioned, it's that, joy in finding that spark in the student. It's when they come to you, they are so interested. They won't need a reminder from you. They won't need a single email from you. They won't need a WhatsApp message telling them what's happening on your paper. They will be at your desk every morning saying, "Ma'am, have you found out this for me? So have you spoken to this gentleman or this lady? Are they going to be able to speak to me?" So when the interest is so vivid and, so obvious, I think we're just, as I said, just catalysts in helping them find the resources and finding the people who can mentor them and guide them, I think. Really.
Great thoughts. What I just want to do is I've got two interesting questions in chat box from Neeraj and Puneet. So if Puneet, you want to just switch on your camera, unmute yourself, go ahead and ask that question, followed by Neeraj who wants to go ahead and ask his question. I'll put it to the panel, but just for the larger room, Puneet and Neeraj, if you just want to switch on your cameras and ask your questions. Fantastic questions, by the way. Love them.
Hi, good evening, everybody. This couldn't have been better. Wonderful panel, wonderful discussion. But I always feel, these discussions on research and development always happens on the point that what are students' hobbies? Coming from an industry background, I would like to ask this to the panel that is there any way that these research and development are imbibed on in the students on the development in the industry size like space, nuclear, the IT networking side, which is very much required in defense, cyber security being an important aspect, and also on the IT software side. So, are there any research and development happening in these areas? Do we push the students or guide the students in this manner, or is it only for college admissions and then the research and development comes down in that manner? To anybody in the panel, please.
Great.
Thank you for
Neeraj,
that question.
Aparna, we'll just take Neeraj's question as well. They're both interlinked. Fantastic questions, both of them. Neeraj, please.
Yeah, so hi everyone. I was coming from a VAC perspective, like there are different ways of learning for each kid. So some may learn visually, some may learn in a kinesthetic way. So when it comes to research, are there opportunities for kids who do not find it very comfortable to write lengthy papers to express themselves in form of pictures, videos, because I think that would make research a lot more interesting and exciting and be adopted even more in the curriculum. Yeah, thanks.
I think I really love that question you asked, but I think given the conventional way in which research papers are accepted for publication by journals, at the moment, I think they do follow that more narrative written kind of format. Maybe Priyank can correct us. He's in the research space, so he may be able to correct me on that when he mentions his points. But I would agree, some students learn better visually and texturally, as you say, and if there is a way to collate your research analysis and maybe your analysis, your final report, in your report, maybe you can put it in that way. But I'm not sure if, I think in terms of pursuing research, we may have to follow some of the conventional pathways to arriving at that conclusion, which then you can present in these formats, perhaps. Priyank, maybe over to you.
Yeah, I'll just address and also, take up this monster. And probably somebody has this thing in mind. Where do you publish? Because most of the parents who come to me, the first question they ask is, or rather, the most important question they have in their mind is, where do we publish our research papers? Where is the child going to publish? See, this is what I recommend, and this is also answer Neeraj's question. I think first of all, we have to understand that in India, as such, there is no credible journal as such. Let's just for high school publishing.
Yeah.
And good journals don't take in high school students' papers for whatever reason they have. And it's hard to, unless you have probably written something, I don't know what kind of paper, but they don't take it. In fact, if I have to publish when I was in my MPhil, it was, more or less the idea that I have to publish it with a professor. Only then they will even look at my paper. So that is how the industry is. What I recommend is, and I've done this with a lot of students, that you build your papers. And Neeraj, if you feel that your students can do a pictorial thing, a photography thing with portfolios and do research in that, good. Put it on a website. Put it, build something of your own, put it there and show that I've done my research. You don't have to go for a third grade journal and show that I've published it. I think that's not the way to do it. Uh, I've seen a student getting into as high as MIT with just a website and a good research paper done by her, put on her own website and nothing else. No fancy journal name being there, and you have to put it there. It was a very simple research, but I think it was able to show a research aptitude for the child, and that was it. That was more or less enough. So even if you feel that you can, through photography, put everything together, do a research, put nuggets of these photographies, describe them, and put it on a simple website, I think that works great. You don't have to think of high-end journals as such.
Actually, I'd love to add a point over here. You know, we all come from school backgrounds where we get a narrative, a sort of a grades or transcripts at the end. You know, I remember advising a student in my earlier role as EduSA advisor from the Aurobindo University in Pondicherry, where they don't have the Aurobindo School and Aurobindo University don't give transcripts. There, if you look at their what is so-called, you know, mark sheet, if you look at it, it'll be a narrative report about the student's ability in different subjects. And that particular student, I remember, was had done his bachelor's degree in physics and had done some 3 or 4 research papers, but there was no transcript per se. But the fact that US universities were willing to give him an admission to a PhD program based on his research papers and the narrative description, which sort of was equivalent of a mark sheet or a transcripts, I think shows you that universities are open and flexible and willing to look beyond the traditional, you know, formats of how we evaluate students. And I also would agree with Priyank, if you actually see over the last couple of years, several homeschool students in Mumbai, and Himanshu may even have their names probably, they have just on the virtue of winning Olympiads got into MIT, not even having completed grade 12. You know, so universities are very flexible, at least US, where my background largely has been, and my understanding and experience has been, is very flexible. Universities are very flexible, willing to see beyond the obvious in a student's profile. And coming back to the other gentleman's questions about doing research in specific industry fields, which are what we might call the future sort of careers or roles that we need to be looking at. I think it's not about pushing students into doing research in that. I think it should be more about there will be students who might have interest in cybersecurity or information technology. They may or may not be in my school, or they may, you know, they may be in my school, but then finding them the right mentors from industry or academia to mentor them for doing research in that. I think that's how we should look at it, rather than saying, shouldn't our students shouldn't our students be doing research only in these sort of sectors? I hope that answers your question. Back to you, Manas.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think Aparna, I just wanted to add to that, just so referring to Puneet's question, in terms of, a lot of the students that we get at Lumiere, for example, we don't ever say, hey, you should do research in this. But speaking of the fields you've mentioned, we have a lot of students who say, hey, I'm interested, and this is a 10th grader I talked to, I think Friday, kind of blew me away, but he said, I'm interested in quantum computing. I don't know what that is. I had to look it up after the meeting. But there are so many students who are already aware of the same conversations that you and I are having that are being had in the news about what industry is great, what industry we should focus on, the way the economy is going. And while they may not have the same understanding of it, they are thinking of them as viable subjects. So whenever we get students, I think as Aparna said, our responsibility mainly is to connect them to someone who can guide them, someone who actually has the expertise that they would need, whether it's defense, whether it's aerospace engineering, IT, AI. So I think it's not about, okay, students are interested in this, they should be interested in this. It comes down to students are honestly across most schools interested in a variety of things. And you often it's interdisciplinary. It's not even one industry or one specific field that they're looking at. And it's the ability of a lot of industry professionals and people in academia, scholars who are able to mentor them and provide that scaffolding for them to take the next.
Also, I think, you know, we must also remember that writing a research paper may not be for everyone. It may be
Exactly.
an interest for some, but other things may be of interest to everybody else. And we must encourage them then to explore those avenues also then. But
Yeah.
there might be those who are absolutely overzealous about doing a research project and coming up with a research paper and getting it published and all of that maybe. Then we encourage those students for that in that direction. But then there are those whose I can't I can quote my own example. I remember I'm also a student from Tata Institute, Priyank, by the way. I did my master's there. And I do remember taking a research class, but not wanting to do a research paper. So I'm sure there are students like me who don't want to do research, you know, but who had other interests. So I think as
Yeah.
counselors or school teachers, I think that's what we need to recognize, that each student has their own strengths, they have different passions, and it is our duty to sort of guide them in those directions and provide the support they need. We are not anybody to perhaps guide them also, but perhaps provide resources and support that if they come asking you for it, basically.
In fact,
I'll just
And
add one
yeah,
thing.
go ahead, Charles.
yeah, it's just that, even before this whole thing about research papers became a big thing, I think we were still doing US applications, particularly, and where we were putting in, let's say, pictures and videos and media coverage, perhaps sometimes, or an external blog, or maybe an additional LOR was also being added, between teachers and them putting out any kind of research that the student had done. So it really, I think, does not exactly boil down to just that paper document. Also, I find that AP research
Yeah.
as a subject itself is also really interdisciplinary, and it also focuses on, I think, developing critical thinking skills. So if there are students who are somewhere in the borderline between, I don't want to do a research paper, but you know what, I feel it's going to be important for the kind of subject I'm wanting to study, sometimes one can encourage them to also do the AP research at the end of the day. It may not entirely lead to an absolute project, but at least it will focus on critical thinking skills. And one of the other things that at least I have found very useful is actually taking students through the SDG goals. And sometimes when they're not able to actually think through what kind of project can really add value and how do I go about it, and you know, whether it's wanting to be a nuclear scientist tomorrow or a radio jockey, at the end of the day there is something out there that may, you know, allow you to think more. And so that's actually the simplest way to maybe sometimes help them build projects, at least for the ones who are totally uninitiated in any which way.
I would
Yeah.
second that, Charushila. A lot of my students have taken part in different challenges, from New York Academy of Science to the Builders Challenge to the Maker Studio one in Goa. They have a challenge that's recently come out, which is sponsored, I think, by Enfield. Students are taking part in that. Conrad Challenge, you name it. And the interesting part is when they're participating in these challenges, they are researching information for that particular participation in that challenge. So that's another way to do research, and it doesn't have to come up as a research paper, but it comes up as their project idea, really, and that
And
translates
don't
into
they do that in MUNs, you know? They do
exactly
it all
Mons
the
True,
as
true,
well.
time.
true,
Absolutely,
true.
that's the best, yeah,
Yeah.
biggest and simplest example, perhaps. Exactly. Yeah.
Priyank, you had some thoughts.
Yeah, there's so much we want to add, I'm just thinking. See, just wanted to add a quick note. See, we understand, and of course, given that not research paper is not for everybody, but I would say that students are going for higher education. And if you remember, I had a slide where I had put learning outcomes. So we have to identify where we want the child to be, or nudge the child to at least understand. Because right now, when I deal with students come in, they even if they write an essay, this is full of adjectives, and it doesn't create a rigor for them to do academic writing per se. So I would say that irrespective of the culmination of the whole process is, I think we should be able to nudge our students to understand what it really research is about, and do at the least that understand what academic writing really employs, for them to really seriously look at whatever they're writing, in terms of whether it's a project, in terms of whether it's a product, or whatever they're doing, just to understand what academic writing really entails. I think that is something which is crucial, even if when you're going for any kind of higher education as such. That understanding really help them,
True. Very true.
considering that don't have it
Yeah.
already.
So what I'd also like to do is I've got two individuals who've had their hand raised for a while, and I've also gotten messages from both of them, and I've justified that I'm going to go to them. But for the larger good of the audience, so this is last week that the five of us were on a call, and it's just interesting that this question came from the audience because we were really talking about the importance of being able to convey it to a student or even their parent. I mean, I'll come to the student parent expectations later on in the discussion, but we were talking about whether it's a project, a patent, a production, or a photograph. It could be sort of research paper is probably just a term that you're using specifically, and then you're talking about STEM versus non-STEM. To each course, there could be something that could be more critical than, let's just say, having a research paper or having theoretical. So it could be more practical as well. So I just love the fact that how over the last 10, 15 minutes, and that's the reason I said, I loved what Puneet and Neeraj had put in, because it was actually in one of my notes, and I saw how Puneet went in all the way all together on one side and Neeraj was on the other side. And I said, hey man, this is just going to take away effort from me to ask these questions. But before I get to my final question, and before I jump into the audience again and take more questions from them, please, yes, I do want to reiterate there are more questions that are coming in from the audience. So that's like a caveat for the panelists and audience. If you still have questions, make sure that you put it out there so that we make sure that we try and ask as many. We might miss some, but we're going to try and cover as many. But I'll throw the mic back to Ashima and Bhakti, who probably would like to make an observation, comment, or something that they'd like to share from their learnings.
Thank you, Manas. Thank you so much, all our panelists. Well, a lot of us are actually talking about what research is and why I work on research papers and everything. I'd just like to add one simple thing to all my counselors and some of the teachers that have joined over here is that research can serve as a foundation for initiating a practical project also. It doesn't have to be a paper. It could be a spark of an innovative startup idea. It could be anything. It could be from a commerce field, somebody who's interested in stocks could also do research on what's going on in that particular market. So it doesn't really have to convert into a research paper. You don't have to really publish it somewhere. It could just be a start of something very small as your own idea, because I've had students where they've had discussions during COVID about how to work and how to really help underprivileged people or others as well, where they have worked on the research idea, but then ultimately it wasn't a paper. It was actually an idea that they were delivering in terms of share a square or ration square, collecting, how to deliver medicines, all of those things, where to buy it from. So again, reiterating, it doesn't have to be a research paper. It can be a start of an idea also, a practical project also.
But I do want to reiterate what Priyank said about academic writing and scientific writing is a skill which we're not teaching in schools right now, and which is there's a huge gap in our students when they go whichever school, high end, low end, whatever you want to call it, when they go from schools to colleges, there is a huge gap in their writing skills. I agree with Priyank on that, and maybe this is something that TOC should work on, coming up with some resources to help schools and teachers in particular about how to improve academic and scientific writing in a school environment. This is a project I would request TOC to take up. I think it's, either we do it as webinars in schools, or we do a little booklet, a resource booklet on how to inculcate academic and scientific writing in students in school. Maybe Priyank could lead the effort, but this is something as coming from a school background, I can say this is the need of the hour in high schools.
And
Yeah, I just unmuted myself. Before
please.
anyone else jumps in, I'm just going to speak.
Go for it.
What a brilliant session. So much to learn. I have my notes. Um, uh, Before I give the university view or perspective, just my 2 cents. The concept of research, I think, is as misunderstood as the concept, even more misunderstood as a concept of liberal arts. Because the term research invokes a lot of it invokes all kinds of not so positive emotions in a lot of students. The connotations are very academic, dry, boring, serious. And my concern is that when we talk about research as yet another skill building, life skill building activity for high school students, um, awareness with the right context is very, very important, because I just heard Ashima make a point which I've never heard before. And that research can be done by anyone. And I know it's a life skill. I know we all deploy it. When we're doing webinars and workshops, we deploy it on a daily basis. When you're doing anything, you research, right? So research, I think the whole connotation needs to be revamped and reintroduced in schools. And that is something definitely, Aparna, that's a great point that we can work on through more awareness workshops like this one, more targeted to students and parents. My second concern is that it's going to become yet another activity that is going to be enforced on students as a badge of honor, that if you do it, you're brilliant. If you don't, you're not. And that's where I think we have to be very cautious about it, because just the way Olympiads and MUNs, that road that they've gone down on, my concern is that research will also invoke even more stress on students who are already extremely stressed. I have just finished evaluating our highest presidential scholarship applications globally, and I am mind blown at the kind of activities that students do. From everything, writing a book is now no big deal for a 14-year-old. It's no big deal. Everyone's writing a book. Everyone's compiling their poems. Everyone's a published author. Everyone has a startup. Everyone has done at least 4 to 5 CAS projects, worked in brilliant community projects, started their own. So and these are kids from underprivileged backgrounds. So I cannot even imagine students of privilege and the kind of access that they have, right? So My point is that whatever we are discussing here, big disclaimer to all the counselors who are listening in, please don't go out there and now just start saying research, research, research. Like, I really think that, do your own research first about this and, get more informed. And I think we have a huge responsibility to inform schools about how to go about this before it's pushed down everyone's throat as the next big thing, without which you cannot get college admissions. And that's my next disclaimer, that anyone who tells you that you cannot get college admission without research is lying. It's not true. It's not true. So colleges do not give you admission based on whether you've done a research project or not. That's a very course specific, it's a very stream specific thing, it's a very college specific thing. But majority of the colleges really don't give admissions based on that. So I just want to put that disclaimer out. I will stop now.
To add on to what Bhakti already said, Aparna's already told all of you she went to TIS and did not want to write a research paper. Look at where she is. So please do not go and force that kid to really write that research paper. Uh, I think one thing that I want to just bring up over here, and while Bhakti and Ashima were talking, it got my, thinking. I got my thinking hat on. While we were at Jindal, some of you were with us in that retreat, and those who could not join us, I really hope that you're coming for the next one. फॉर्म तो खत्म हो गए, अभी नहीं भरा तो कुछ नहीं होगा, but I really do hope you're coming for the next one, because it's an experience altogether. One thing that organically started coming up in that conversation was experiential learning. And we started talking about individuals who are already members of TOC, or organizations who are already, looking towards us and starting to talk to us or our members about how could they create more experiential learning projects. So what I could really sum up from the last 5-10 minutes of discussion was, it just seems like what's happened is while the student is overburdened, and there's a whole lot to do, but I think experiential learning is probably going to be the next big thing after the big thing, that is research, that we're already discussing. What I do want to now, while using this point, drag the attention of my panelists again, so I want them to speak again before we throw the floor open to the audience for their questions, is all four of you worked with students and parents, probably in different capacities. Some of you have had a lot more exposure to students, some of you have got way more exposure to parents. My big challenge is, I'm sure that anybody who walks up to you for a conversation comes with a whole bag full of expectations. And you've already talked about it in one or the other way. Somebody wants to get into a journal, somebody wants to get published into a big, or probably make a big bang, someone wants to get into a big university. We've highlighted the challenge. What I want to get to is, how did you handle it? Let's say if I'm an, you know nefarious kid who's hell-bent on not researching, and my father's hell-bent that I must be published and I should go and read at Harvard. Now, my expectation is, you're probably going to be my best friend in the room and help me understand what research is. And I'm not going to make it any easy for you. But my father's expectation is, whatever be the price tag or the ticket that he's paid for you, I might come from an underprivileged or a privileged background, being able to pay it in dollars or Indian rupees or even peso. But then his expectation is this is a very Indian mindset or a South Asian mindset. Once we've paid for a service, we just assume it's done. So probably uh, Priyank and Nirbhay, who really work with a lot of students directly on helping and guiding them on research, maybe if you could talk about, how do you navigate the child's expectations on what is their net sum or their gain out of this? And Aparna and Charushila, I'm sure, who speak to students, but more often than not, really will just have parents, either pick up a call or drop a text or call someone else and say, in Aparna's case, maybe call the principal and say, can you get Aparna to answer that? In Charu's case, maybe someone from the team is like, ma'am, wo bahut phone laga rahe, kya bole unke papa or mummy ko? So I want you both to probably come from a perspective where you talk about handling those parent expectations, and Priyank and Nirbhay to talk about learners' expectations. So again, the floor is open. I think it will be interesting if we could just alternate again, one for the parent side, one for the student side again. So it just gives us a nice banter of back and forth in terms of how it may really look like for a counselor, IEC, or a research guide. Please, anybody who wants to go first, I don't want to really be moderating this. I'm just going to hear this passionately as this dreamy eye kid who at one point in time really had dreams to go to a big university but didn't go for it.
I don't think you lost out much in not going to a big university. Don't worry. I think life teaches us a lot more than going to a university does. That's my personal opinion. But having said that, I'll say I think counselors and teachers are really also jugglers in another avatar. We are juggling between the parents' expectations and the students' interests. And I think it's a very subtle sort of role that we play, where we try and explain to parents how important it is for the students to pursue what their interests and passions are, vis-a-vis what the parents think is going to help the student get into X or Y university. And what always helps is giving them case studies and examples. Okay, so this student did this student had this profile, didn't get into Harvard. So how do you assume that your student will, by doing the same thing, is going to get into Harvard also? So I mean, there's no cookie cutter answer for this, but it's one really goes with each student's case. One, we have to be just mainly remember we are advocates for the students at the end of the day. And in our role as advocate for the student, we have to try and explain to the parents as gently if possibly, if and firmly if not so possibly, that we must put the students' interests first and see if doing research is really a right fit for the student or not. And we can also offer suggestions for what else the student could do, because we are aware of what their interests are, because we've interacted with them a lot in school. So we're aware of that, then we can tell the parent that the student can be steered in this direction where they might actually shine and do much better, and therefore be more noticed by the admissions committee reviewing their application. So I think that's just a bit of a subtle art of managing, as I call it. Charushila?
All right, I'm just wondering. But I totally agree with you, Parna. I think, yes, we are jugglers and we are, but I also feel that we are also a reflection, and we are a reflection of what the university is expecting from the student, and we are also reflective of what um, what the world is coming down to. So I really love that scene in Karate Kid, if you've seen that movie, where he's looking at that snake, and
Mm.
as the snake is moving, he's also moving with that. So imagine that your student is kind of moving with you in that motion. And that motion is only possible when you are calm, when you are composed, when you have it all together. And sometimes, I mean, I'm sure there are counselors in the room who sometimes don't have it all together. Yeah. And you're meeting up with this parent in this family, and hell is breaking loose in perhaps your own life or anything else, but yet you have to ensure that you reflect the right things out there, and you're able to therefore get the right response from the parent to the student. That is my one perspective. And the other is, at least I try to approach my meetings with that. Second is that I feel that our role as educators and counselors is only to simplify complex information. And if that is our only role, then it becomes our moral, ethical, every kind of responsibilities to sit this parent down and say, okay, let me take you through what a common app really looks like. Okay. It will have these 10 activities. It will have these multiple essays. It will have a portfolio slide room. It will have these things. So now you tell me, how much time do you have? You've come to me in grade 12, and there are 3 months to the application, and you want this kick-ass profile with a research paper, with an internship, with something else. And we also run our own community engagement program through our own NGO. So I'm very mindful that this is getting recorded. So it's just you cannot exactly do magic, and I don't have a magic wand in my hand, even though you might believe me to be that magician. um, Having said that, what I also try to then do with a student is to say that, okay, listen, I see these 10 gaps that are staring at us in the face, and we see that we will not be able to fulfill all the 10 gaps. But you know what? We can do three, and we can do those three really well. Are you with me on that? Okay, so let's work on those three gaps then. Whether it's a putting together a research document, or whether it's just working on your next music composition, or whether it's just doing well in your grades, and just doing well in your midterm exams, whatever that is, it just needs to be done. So I think that's the only approach. Nirbhay.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Thank you. For me, I think I'm going to talk a little bit about the student's perspective, but um, I run into this problem, which is that I will often have a meeting with a student, and then I'll have a meeting with that student and their parent next week, and I'm meeting a completely different student. And I think the navigation that ends up happening is not so much about, what research is, but what the student is looking to get out of this opportunity and what the parent wants this opportunity to be. And unfortunately, when the parent and the student are often in the same space together and I'm talking to them, it's not so easy for the student to tell me exactly what they're looking for. If they say, well, I'm just really excited about this topic, I did this project, I just want to learn more, parent will often egg them on and say, no, what, don't you want to get published? What's the point of research if you're not going to get published? I have to really, I'm really grateful for Aparna and Bhakti for putting those disclaimers out there, because this idea that research is this be all end all, answer to your questions is one of the main things I have to navigate when I'm talking to parents, sometimes students as well, because to them it's they mix up the result, the research paper or the project, or the process, which is really where the learning happens, which is why it has even become this big thing of research being part of college applications and things like that, is because the process is actually the main sort of learning that any student goes away with. And so for me, a lot of that navigation comes down to gently trying to ask the parent, what do you think your child is interested in, and trying to coax the student into saying, okay, I understand that you think getting published is the answer, but I think I'm lucky in that sense that we've been able to. I'm often able to provide specific examples, or we've had some interviews with the admission officers from the U.S. So when we have a parent who's specifically saying, well, what does it matter if they do research? They have to get published. I'm able to point them to these interviews and these resources and say, hey, we've talked to admission officers. We've asked them, do you care that the student is published, or do you care about the research paper? And Aparna is right. Many of those admission officers are not going to be looking at research at an in-depth level. They may not even be from the same department. But when we were vetting our program at a couple of universities in the US and asking them to sort of vet structure of it and ensure that student authorship remained, we found is that for most of these admission officers that were looking at research seriously, they called publication a feather in the cap. It's great if it's there, it's a cherry on top, but the expectation that a high school student should be published is crazy. It is absolutely insane. If a student is doing that, great, right? But at the end of the day, when they're looking at research papers or even the abstract of the research paper, they're looking at the students learning and what they've been able to bring to that paper, and if that comes through. So when I'm managing those expectations for parents and for students, I'm not saying, hey, you have to do this, or you should do this, or you're going to be able to do this if you do research. My questions are always around navigating it to one central question. What do you want to do research for? And do you think the process of research will help you get there? And that's really sort of where my conversations go from there. But yeah, I think Priyank can add more in terms of how specifically students are coming at this, problem.
Yeah, so much has been already spoken about. So I'll just add two things. See, one, I think since this is a probably an audience more of counselors, I think I want all of us to understand is that we want students to have research skills. It's as simple as that. So instead of you telling a child that, because many times student comes to me and then let's say a student from a national board who has never done research, why would they come suddenly in 12th grade and tell me that I want a paper? It is only because of college application. And so to be honest, it's too late for them to develop that kind of research paper which they have imagined in their head. And for us to kind of have that discussion with the parent, like give an example. One of the parent came in and he spoke to me and he's like, my child is really interested in Sufi music, and by the way he was talking I really felt, oh wow, well it's something which is very different, and I was really interested in the way he framed and everything. And then I had a meeting with the student, and if I figured out that Sufi, forget Sufi, nothing. She's not interested in research. So it was all because she had to apply. She's applying, and she wanted a paper out of it. And then I had a very frank chat with the parent, and I told him that if the child is interested, though we don't have a lot of time, you can help him or her nudge, to do that effort to bring that research on paper as such. But do you really want to do it? There is so many things that the child can do, and you hardly have time as such. Does the child really have that time to put in and make sure that that paper is reaching its culmination stage, which is very difficult since you are already coming to a standard. So what point I want to say is that, see, we need to start a little early. Counselors have to look at this as a skill, not really necessarily as something which will get you into Ivy League. We have to stop looking at this only for Ivy Leagues or only for big colleges and only for application. We have to start telling parents early that research is a skill that they can develop academic writing skill they can develop, and you have to start early. Let's nudge our children to write properly in probably 9th grade, 10th grade, whatever, as early as we can, to understand where they are. Because see, IB student, I've seen them writing, still writing good, or rather doing good writing in 5th grade, 6th grade, and CBSE students, even then they have come out of 12th grade, they don't know how to write. Their essays are full of all kinds of adjectives possible. So we have to start thinking of this as something which is additional skill that students should develop. And yes, of course, it could culminate into a paper which will help in application and everything else. But before everything, let's just think of this as a skill, as rather something which students should develop, or we can help them develop over a period of time.
I would
Also,
also
small
urge,
thing,
sorry, go ahead. Go
a
ahead.
small thing that I'd add to that, Priyank, you very rightly said that it's sometimes when students come in late, one does feel that they've kind of missed the bus, so to say, and it's really a lot of panic situation. And that's the time also we need to look back at their journeys. And sometimes their journeys have been very, very meaningful. And they are perhaps not giving it as much importance. Like, I helped my younger brother through his math problems, etc. I mean, how is that a big deal? How do I even mention that on my application? But the point is, you can. And it was the pandemic, everybody knows that. So if you were helping a grandparent go through their illness, or you were doing little things that were endearing anyways. So how can we build something around that is also somewhere our role, to just help them see through the story of their life, and then say that, okay, these are the things from your narrative that can really make sense, and it can perhaps be built also upon. Yeah, so it's not all doomsday if you come late as well.
The other point I wanted to add is we're also speaking from the point of view of somebody having to mentor the student to do the research work. It can be the other way around. If you go, like I've shared the link for the Irish National Fair here in the chat box, if you just go to the website and see the list of research papers that are being, or projects that are being submitted to and those that have been selected as the finalists on the Irish National Fair, you will be amazed at the kind of subjects that they're researching in. Within each subject, the kind of categories that they're researching on, and it's all going over my head, every single research paper. And I've read a bit, I can say that. But if it's going over my head, it also tells me the potential there is for doing research amongst our students. And I would encourage teachers and counselors to please do visit that website and see the kind of research that some of the shortlisted finalists have come up with for this year's cycle. And out of these students, they will then select the few students who will represent India in the Regeneron International Science and Engineering Fair. So now you know what is the caliber of research these students are doing, and the caliber of students they're going to be up against in the Regeneron ISEF. So that also tells you that there is actually probably already an ecosystem within the student community for pursuing this level of research already. So that's the other side of the story also that we need to be aware of.
Great. Thank you for your observations. And I really liked specifically how, in all honesty, for the last 15 minutes, I wasn't even a part of the conversation. You totally forgot me. I did not like that, but I like that as well. Uh, Before we really move towards the closing, so I put a message on the group in case if someone's not been able to join the session and still wants to ask a question. I've given them the opportunity, and I'm going to move towards some closing remarks that I want to invite from panelists, but I don't want to do that first because I know what happens. The moment you give in closing remarks, people start dropping out. And what happens is, for unfortunately, people like ourselves or AGB members or TOC founders, we don't even get to speak to the audience. So, before I give Bhakti a chance as an invited founder to come and share her thoughts, what I want to tell is for everybody who's been asking ये लड़का करता क्या है, आप लोग देख चुके हैं. जितने लोग आखिर तक रुके, आप सबके लिए मेरा बहुत सारा प्यार. If you want to engage me as a professional, great. Only for your love you've shown me right now, 20% extra additional charge for you. No discount, please. No discount, please, at all. This is your love, and your love should be felt by me, not only seen by me. All right. Great. I can see Bhakti cannot hold her laughter. Bhakti, I'm coming for that role at Huron and going to charge you 25% extra on that CTC. Great. I'm going to get a bonus. Perfect. So, what I want to do is, I just want to tell this one. So before again give to Bhakti, I think it's been an exciting and very interesting discussion from how it evolved for anybody who stayed till us till this far, I think all of you really need to know this, that how it evolved from a presentation to a discussion to a panel to a panel come presentation come Q&A. I think it's been a very long journey. I know for a fact that my panelists had asked me not to ask difficult questions. I actually did my own research and put a 5-page document over here filled with questions. So I've gotten good full marks on research paper, but because of you, the audience, I'm going to fail my exams because I made sure I asked them the difficult questions. I think if we fail to not really take your question, please don't hold it against us. I think it's just the time limits us. Um, all of our panelists are members. I do encourage that you reach out to them. In case if not them, probably the members group is a great place to just put a question out there. Maybe someone else might want to do a talk with you or Tuesday talk is with you. And I think it's just these conversations that really hold us all together. Imagine some few of us coming on a Tuesday evening, really talking about things that may or may not necessarily be impacting us, whether it's from a learning perspective or a student perspective, fathers or a mother's worry, anything that you might want to say. But I won't take any more time. I'll just invite Bhakti for, I really wanted to do this, that I want to hear from the founders on what did they think about the whole discussion. And it's not a judgment, please, to anybody who's seeing or the panelists. This is not a judgment or an invitation of such, but I think they're seeing it from a very different perspective. I'm sure they get bombarded by requests every day. I'm sure a whole lot of our members are always having questions who find it very difficult to come and open up in spaces. So really, if the founder could share something that is, either from their observation, something that the member has shared and who's felt a little shy to come up on a rostrum and speak, please, over to you, Bhakti.
Thank you so much, Manas. And what a wonderful session. I think the last 1.5 hours, I mean, the fact that we still have 24 people on this session after 1.5 hours is testament to how engaging this was. Before I move into some final remarks, just to sum it up, I do a lot of profile building workshops, like I think many of us do. And what I always tell parents and students and counselors is that profile building is not for college admissions. Profile building is for skills which actually come more handy after you get into college. So even with research skills, with writing skills, with all of this, every activity that a student undertakes, it's not about the stack of certificates. The volume matters, but quality matters more, depth matters more. It's about the fit that matters. And at the end of the day, it's the skills you will build that will help you after you get into college, whether you study in India or abroad. This is what's going to help. So, research or anything else is not about college admissions. It's about skills that you will build that will help you after you get into college. That is my crux of how I look at a lot of these experiential learning activities. The space is booming. There are experiential learning companies that call us every day, that talk to us every day, that want advice every day. And I'll just say this, there's a lot of exciting stuff happening. If you are already a part of something like this, great. If you're thinking on those lines, reach out, collaborate. There are enough and more people here who are more than willing to either be a part of that vision or build it with you or just help you along the way. This space, I'm sure many of you watch Shark Tank. Um, when you watch Shark Tank, you are like, oh my God, मेरे space में ये opportunity है, ये opportunity है. And don't think that any of those ideas are small. You will always be able to create something out of it. And TOC is a huge example of that. It was formed out of a comment on a LinkedIn post, literally. So just don't ever think that any of your ideas are too small to be taken up. You guys are all doing brilliant work. I want to move on to thank every one of you on the panel, because I know how much work has gone into it. And I can see this without blinking an eye, that I've been a part of every session that has been done in TOC in the last 1 year. This session has put in the most effort, the most hard work. Each one of you, starting from Priyank, knowing how passionate he is about research. Priyank, thank you for you're the reason why we're even having this conversation. So thank you for bringing this up. It was brilliant. It was much needed, and nobody was really talking about it. Manas, we found our next MC for the next whole year for TOC events, Ashima. I have made a note of this. Every time I need someone absolutely killer, we need someone absolutely killer, we know who to go to. Manas, you were amazing. I have learned so much from the way you've conducted this. Brilliant. I mean, you made this session what it was. Thank you so much. Charu, you're always the silent worker who works in the background but gets things together. So thank you for being that stable factor in every session that you're part of. I really, really cherish and value everything that you do for TOC. Ashima, same goes for you. You're the silent background worker. Aparna, this is the first time that I've ever heard you, and oh my God, like I can't wait to see you in Bangalore. I just can't. Not that any of what I'm saying matters, but I'm just sharing my personal learnings from this. Thank you, Aparna. You had some brilliant insights. And last, but of course not the least, Nirbhai, the man from Lumiere. Lumiere, you've disrupted the research space for K-12. And you have a huge responsibility on your shoulders as you grow. You've given an aspiration to so many students and counselors for yet another way to build this skill, which is very important. But you have a huge, huge responsibility on your shoulder as a global organization to make sure that awareness for research comes with great context and responsibility. So we look forward to actually partnering with you in this year and creating more awareness for research, and not just you, but anyone, whether you're an organization or not, it doesn't matter. If you're passionate, we would love to work with you. Just last point, I know I've already taken up 3 minutes, but I promise this is my last point. TOC this year is going to really innovate the way it works with its members. The first year has been a lot of learning. We come closer to our renewal, and you will all hear about it very, very soon. I'm not here to pitch renewal. All I'm here to say is that next year, basically 24, we want to see more folks involved in passion projects. And we will be creating a lot more subgroups, working groups, whether it's for psychometric assessments or whether it is for profile building and research. This is what we aim to do. This is our vision. And so if you are interested in being a part of it, when we make these announcements for the next set of AGB, for the next advisory, please, please, please reach out if you want to be a part, because it's all member driven. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Bhakti, so much. So this is going to be probably the most unique time that you've had on a panel. We'll have the vote of thanks first and closing remarks later. नहीं तो ये जितने बच्चे लोग हैं ये भी भाग जाएंगे और आशिमा को नहीं सुनेंगे एंड उससे मेरा हार्ट ब्रेक हो जाएगा. ठीक है? Everybody, please. 2-5 मिनट और लगेंगे. थोड़ा सा प्यार और दे दो. Ashima, over to you.
Thank you so much, Manas. I think the conversation actually started on research was from a very small comment on TOC where everybody was contemplating whether research should be done in high school or not. And that is where Priyank and me, we started having these conversations on how we should really initiate this whole topic of, what is research? Why is there so much hype about research? These companies who are charging a bomb from students to do research. So that was a small seed, I'd say, that we had planted. And look, we are here 2 months, Priyank, and we've successfully delivered this session. Thank you so much. I can't, expect more out of this. Thank you, Charushala. Thank you, Nirbhay. Thank you, Aparna. Thank you, Manas. A huge, huge thank you to you for, moderating this panel discussion, come informative session, and we look forward to doing many more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashima. So now we'll just get back to Aparna, Charushila, I think Nirbhay and Priyank. That's just in alphabetical order. I like to do something very interesting towards closing remarks. You get 15 seconds each, and I'm going to just buzz you out. Like I'm just going to like, that's it. But you get 2 times. You get 15 seconds twice. So instead of giving you 30 seconds or 1 minute in one go, we really want you to condense your thoughts and give it out to the audience as key takeaways, because in all honesty, last hour and a half, fantastic. But I want you to, one, at one point give a statement, and two, leave them with a question, something that they can go back to and keep thinking about. I don't want this to stop right here. This is, let's say, a wheel that we've already started rolling down the hill, and I want to continue, keep this going, right? So we'll probably again go in the alphabetical order, and then we'll change the alphabetical order again. So if Aparna goes first at the first time, then Priyank's going to go first the second time around. So it's going to be Aparna, Charushila, Nirbhay, Priyank. Priyank, Nirbhay, Charushila, Aparna, right? 15 seconds on the clock. I just have this. You first give a statement, and then when we come back to you, you give us a question to think about. Aparna, the floor is yours.
Remember, we are always advocates for our students, and we must always nourish, encourage, support our students.
Fantastic. Charushila, over to you.
All right, forget Google search, start searching inwards inside your school, inside your home, inside your local areas, and you will never fall short of research projects.
Just there. All right. Nirbhay, your turn.
Don't think about research as what you have to do. Think about research as what you want to learn.
Fantastic. Priyank, your statement.
I have 30 seconds, I guess. Okay, so
Yes.
quick thing. I think reflect on what is your role. I think we all need to see what is our own role in this whole game of research, or rather the counseling space, and then ask yourself that what do we really want for our students. And when we understand this bigger responsibility of giving back to our students and seeing that they really flourish, it will automatically come to us that we help them build those research skills. So thank you all the co-panelists, thank you Ashima, thank you Manas, thank you everybody.
Love
Thank
it.
you
You just
Bhakti, and
merged
thank
your
you.
question and statement both. सवाल भी करूंगा, जवाब भी दूंगा. I love it. Nirbhay, 15 seconds. I want you to put a question in everybody's mind before we leave. Over to you.
I think my question is really simple. I hope it's just that, is research the only way to build a lot of the skills that we've discussed today?
Great. Charushila, yours.
If college planning is about self discovery, what are you going to help your student discover today?
Oh, wow. All right. Aparna, your question.
Gosh, I'm flummoxed, frankly, after everybody's said what they've said. But
Since you're going last, you get extra 5 seconds.
all right. So, I think we need. I think very carefully when you're advising your students on what they need to do. Research is just one element of that larger profile building exercise. So, be very mindful of your uh, advice to students as well, I would say.
Fantastic. Lovely. Thank you everybody who's really put up with everything that we wanted to do. I think we reserved only 90 minutes for this and we wanted to wind up in 80, but we've already crossed our 100-minute mark, I think at the 110th minute. This has been lovely. I think we already have a recording. Hopefully it's going to be available for a lot of people to see, and we're going to be able to inspire a lot many more who, compared to those who are still there in the audience. And I see Ashma's rightly brought it to us. We still have 21 over here. I think what would really make me happy is everybody. I know you could be in a difficult situation. Just switch on your cameras. We can take a screenshot because. I know at the peak we were 40. We started with 26. It always is nice to acknowledge those who've really spent as much time with us over here, made sure that whether you had a question or not, you've heard what people had to say. I think listening is one of the biggest art forms that is undervalued. Khushbu, Ashma, Nisha, Nidhi, Vasant, Naman. I've got someone named PI. Right, so we're down to 20. PI, Vasant, Naman, Nidhi, Ashma. Is those who are not switching on your cameras, I know आप login करके छोड़ के चले गए हो 2 घंटे पहले phone. Anu, Ashima. I have Ashima Sethi. I have two Ashima Sethis. Why do I have two Ashima Sethis on my screen? One wasn't enough for her, huh? Nisha and Vasant. निशा एंड वसंत, ग्रेट ग्रेट ग्रेट. ठीक है, अभी हमें पता है अगली बार कोई रिन्यू करने आ रहा है तो किसको नहीं रिन्यू करने देना है. ये लॉग इन करके ऐसे बैठ जाते हैं सब. ग्रेट. कैन वी ऑल स्माइल? इफ यू वांट टू गो फ्री स्टाइल, बी माय गेस्ट प्लीज, बाय ऑल मींस जस्ट स्माइल. Got it. Fantastic. I'm just going to edit this and put this on the group. But thank you again, everyone. I think this has been lovely hosting all of you. Not just the speakers, but even the audience. Hopefully, we'll see you soon in the next Tuesday Talkies. I speak on behalf of the founders and the AGB. If nothing, vote for me for the next election, please. Please. All right. Thanks a lot. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, everybody. Good night. Thank you, Gopal.